Good afternoon. My name is Jeanne Martinson, and I am publisher of Wood Dragon Books. And I'm really excited for us to come off an amazing couple of weeks of launching a new book. And this new book is called I'm Just Gerry, Building a Forever Company the Price Way. And this was the most unique book, and the process has been the most unique process of having a book come to market that Wood Dragon Books has ever experienced. So with me today is Rob Wozny, who is the author of the book. And I am just so glad to interview Rob and talk about this project and how it has all spun out to be something much bigger than what anyone originally thought. So Rob, tell me how this book project even came to be.
Okay, thank you, Jeanne. First of all, thank you for having me on your webinar today. And also thank you for being part of this process, because you're not only publisher, but you were editor and played a very important role in getting the manuscript and the book to where it is today. So I will encourage you, as I'm sharing answers to your questions, feel free to share your insight, because you certainly have a unique insight to the process. So to your question about how the book come to be, well, it wasn't something that was planned. And a lot of books usually are quite planned. When an author plans to write a book, it's quite a deliberate process. You don't just rush into a book. Whereas with I'm Just Gerry was a process that came rather quickly, and we executed it rather quickly. And we'll talk about that as we go through the interview. But how I came into I'm Just Gerry was a result of my first business book, Storytelling for Business, The Art and Science of Creating Connection in the Digital Age. So this book came out about a year and a half ago, and at my book launch was a senior executive at Price Industries and a mutual contact and friend. And after the book launch, he approached me and he said, Rob, we've been kicking around the idea of doing our own book to codify the lessons learned and best practices, skills, stories of our owner, Gerry Price of Price Industries, just as a way to commemorate our 75th anniversary in 2024, and to give to future generations and to all our stakeholders, our internal stakeholders, who have been along for the ride, so to speak, about the ascension of Price Industries, which is now a very successful company. And I thought, well, this was interesting. At the time, I thought, well, I just released this book. I just came out of a very high-profile, prominent corporate communications gig for 6 years, and transitioning back into business again, and thought, really, this is kind of like the last thing I should be doing is another book when I've just launched another one. I got to focus on marketing that, get my business going. And I thought, well, at the very least, why don't I, meet with your leadership team and talk about what the process could look like to get the book from start to finish, because I felt somewhat confident. I just published a book and went through the process and figured I could at least give them some idea of what this looks like, because the recency was there. And so we did that. We went through the process, and they felt, hey, this is interesting. This is something we potentially could do. And Rob, would you write it for us? And originally, again, I deferred back to my current status, just released a book, just come back into business. And then I was invited by Gerry himself to come to an event that is called the Annual Bankers Presentation. And it's noted in the book a couple times, elaborates on the significance of this event. But in a nutshell, this event is kind of like the State of the Union of the company, bringing all their stakeholders, lenders, partners, just basically to talk about where the company is and where it's going. But Gerry always gives a bit of a backstory about where the company started when he took over in the 80s to where it is now. And it is quite the story. And I thought, this is interesting. This is quite the business book. And thought, okay, I think I'm going to give this a go. And so we jumped in, and it was an ambitious project. As you know, Jeanne, it was 19 months from start to finish. And the book is alive and well and in the world today. So that's it.
Alive and well in hardcover and paperback and ebook. And soon we're going to be doing an audio book. Oh, we're so excited about that. We've just actually chosen our narrator who's going to be doing the audio book. So that'll be out later this spring, definitely before summer. I just find it really fascinating that a company like Price Industries, a $1 billion company, employing so many people is such a kind of a under the radar type of company. And I know because they don't sell directly to the public, they're a business to business company. And so sometimes people don't know who they are because they're not in the industry and they don't have a big building downtown Winnipeg. They have a really big building somewhere else in Winnipeg. But even when I think about the information that you talked about this company that some people don't know about, it was amazing how transparent the senior executives and Gerry himself were about the rise of this company. How did that come about? Because that's not kind of a normal thing. Businesses like to talk about everything they did right, but not everything that kind of went wrong and could have had a different decision. Like what was that experience in interviewing people about that? Really the bare bones, the without clothing skeleton of the company.
Yeah, well, it's probably a foundational part of the book in itself, the essence of the book. And I will note that there's 13 guiding tenets, as they're called, the Price Way, and each one serves aptly as a chapter in the book. And not to give too much away, but through the process, I said to the Price leadership team, and I think even to Gerry, and again, it documented in the book that if you were to look for a 14th tenet, transparency would be it, because they're so willing to share. And if you go back to that banker's orientation, Gerry was sharing so much really great stories and very candidly about how difficult some of the very challenging situations he faced to keep the company going, and especially the US expansion days, which really was the foundation for where the company is today. So in that sense, that's what makes it such an appealing book. And we talked very deliberately when I came on as the author. I guess my primary caveat was that we need to tell the true stories of this company. Telling just the greatest hits, as it were. I mean, everyone knows the company's successful, but I think what's truly interesting and what makes the most compelling stories are the ones of how did you get there? How did you get through some of these very difficult decisions, or some of these on the brink moments, or as Gerry calls them, living on the edge moments? And there are a number of them that, frankly, would have sunk some leaders, or some leaders or some companies just wouldn't have that intestinal fortitude to go forward. And I think these are the differentiating factors that make the book so compelling, and which also tells the story of how the company gets to where it is. So it was a very strategic and deliberate approach that we need to tell those stories. And you're right, Jeanne, as a professional business communicator, a lot of organizations and companies don't share their stories. And by the way, there's nothing wrong with that. That makes sense based on the business objectives for a lot of companies. But for this book, and where the company is at 75 years, there are some generational gaps. A lot of the younger generation of employees come in, they see this very successful company that I'm a part of. And, the feedback that we're hearing now that the book has been out and distributed to their employees, that a lot of them are going, had no idea that there was such a path to get to make this company that I'm enjoying working for, that's been successful. It wasn't that easy in the beginning, and it reinforces the lessons learned, best practices, and I think reinforces to some degree some level of humility in doing business, that it wasn't always this way. And not to say that it could be that way again, but I think it's always good to have that level of humility in business no matter how successful you are. And I think the book underscores that to some degree, that if we stay true to our tenets, our tenets in the Price Way, we'll do our best to continue to be successful.
Thanks, Rob. Now, it's interesting, this whole concept of the tenets and their principles, their guidelines, they're kind of the rules of the Price Way. And with working on the book, I'm aware that these kind of started with Gerry and his wife, Barbara, around their kitchen table. And I correct me if I'm wrong, but I think they wrote it on the back of an envelope or a serviette or something. And so tell me about the metamorphosis from that original idea through to these 13 that are kind of bedrock for the company so much that they actually have them inscribed on walls in different places and in their head office in Winnipeg.
Sure, and for what it's worth, again, having worked with a number of large entities, a lot of corporations have these kind of tenets, if you will, or guiding principles. These 13 are just what makes up the Priceway. And I think that's why it's important that it's in a book and they serve as chapters, because anyone who picks the book up, with a business background, for example, can benefit from, well, how did this company apply these particular tenets? Some of them are very similar to ours. And let's see how they got through some of them, or let's see how it's worked for them. And let's see if we can glean something from what's in this book. And it's important to note that with the writing of this book and putting it out there to external audiences, because it's available externally, that in no way are we trying to say that this is the way of doing business. It's just a way that's worked for Price, and it's worked very well. So read the book, take from it what you will, or maybe you don't. It's just, it's part of, again, the ethos of the company, and particularly Gerry, to share and give back and be of service. So here it is, read the book. Here's our bumps and bruises and things that worked and things that didn't work, and how we're going to continue to be a company for the next 75 years, which is why we added the tagline, building a forever company the Price way.
So when we talk about these 13 principles, tenets, I just want to, for the audience to know what they are. Service, the golden rule, straight goods, growth, innovation, risk, resilience and grit. I love that word, grit. Foundation and legacy, team humility and no ego, execution, financial discipline, distributed leadership, and the greater good. A lot, like you said, a lot of companies might have similar principles, guiding rules, etc. But what I find interesting about this book is each of those are really well illustrated by stories of where the company really had to step up to the bar to make that, to be able to stand behind that particular principle. And that's why I just think anyone in any industry can find good value of this book. Even though it started out as, hey, let's celebrate Gerry and our 75 years as an organization and how we got here for the good of our stakeholders and the good of our employees and for the legacy of the organization, and how popular this book has been with people who might not even know Gerry Price, but are looking for a really great little business book to move their organization forward, and also to be able to clearly express some of these values that they want on their own team. When you think about this book is really kind of very much an example of what you taught in your first book. Can you just tell the audience a bit about that connection a little more?
Sure, happy to. So storytelling for business, the art and science of creating connection in the digital age, is really a business communicator's point of view about how to tell the story of your business. And I'm Just Gerry is a remarkable story about a business. And even the structure of how I wrote the book, I go into detail how that structure is in here. I call it the petal structure. And that's how I wrote the book. And so the principle is that your core idea is the center of the flower, if you will, and that is Gerry's journey. And then the petal is kind of like each tenet, kind of comes around to it. And so that's the storytelling structure I talk about here. It's how to tell the story of your business, and then I apply that to I'm Just Gerry in this book. Now, that's not to say if you're looking at this saying, well, I have to write a book to tell a story of my business. Not true. I mean, you can apply that to a number of mediums as far as telling your story, but it does apply, especially for something a very large scale, like a book. And what's been interesting in my experience, Jeannie, some 25 years as a professional storyteller, I've never had an experience quite like a business book like I'm Just Gerry. And what I mean by that is that I've produced all kinds of stories in different mediums, you name it, pretty well had all kinds of experience, but never a book like I'm Just Gerry. And the distinct difference, or what I'm seeing, is the power of this book that I consistently get the feedback from their leadership team, is that the power of, sliding a book across to a new partner or a tenured employee, just that that wow factor that comes along with it. And even partners are buying the book, like partners are buying the book in, in some significant quantities to give to their employees. And I don't get that with, let's say, if I produce a video series or anything else. There is just something, there's a real cachet that comes along with a book. Now, again, the business communicator, and he says that don't be discouraged against everything you're doing, because all that is all well and good. I'm just saying that if you are entertaining this idea of a book like this, there is just something very special about a business book that codifies the language in this type of fashion, this type of treatment.
Yeah, no, it's fascinating. I think the way this book came together, and I want to say hundreds. I think how many hours of interviews did you do?
So I tracked everything almost to the minute, and I want to say I don't have my spreadsheet in front of me, but I know I spent 13 hours one-on-one with Gerry, and Barb was part of that as well too. Barb Price, his wife, and then I want to say it's in the 40s, the rest of the hours. And the reason why I needed to do that, Jeannie, is because this is a company that produces highly engineered products, and these are people I'm talking to with master's degrees, some cases PhDs. Gerry has a PhD himself, so this was very technical language, and that was a very challenging part for me, to write this in a way that protects the integrity of their language, the lexicon of price industry, but also to make it simpler and easier to read and digest for the lay reader who perhaps picks this book up. So that really was why so much time was needed, because I sometimes had to go back 2 or 3 times to some folks to say, okay, can you explain this to me so I can simplify it and present it in a way, again, so it falls in the middle of that continuum from the necessary technical language to the other side where it has to be simple, and just sticking right in the middle. And so far, feedback has been, we've kind of hit that sweet spot, and that took a fair bit of work with you in particular as editor, and we had an editor within the Price team, and there was a team that worked on this. So it wasn't, I want to be very clear, this wasn't just me who helped get this to there was some very key folks in the Price leadership team, who were, by the way, very busy executives who spent an extreme amount of time working on this. So just to show the level of commitment. So if there's anything I want to get across, is that this was very much a team effort to get this book done.
And when you think about that technology terminology, is from an editorial perspective, I've done a lot of work that is science and finance based. It's from an editor and a publishing perspective, but you get to something and go like, no idea at all what that means. And I think what's great about this book, if you have a technical background, especially an engineering background, you're going to find it really interesting. And if you don't, you're going to find it really interesting, because it's explained. Any stories that have a technical piece to it, not all the stories do, that have a technical piece to it, it's explained enough that the reader really does get what's happening in the story. And I think that that's a real powerful thing to make this book so universal, and why it has been doing so well as far as sales to people who are not necessarily connected to the Price company. Of course, it's available on Amazon. If for readers who are in the United States, it's available through Barnes and Noble. If you're in the New York area, it's available through McNally Jackson. They have 4 shops in the greater New York area. But of course, on a lot of other online mechanisms. So when we think about this book from the author's perspective, who would you say would benefit most from this book?
Well, before I answer that question, I also want to note, and it's important to note with this book, is that there is a very substantive and in-depth afterword written by Gerry himself. And I think that's key to note, because he felt it was essential to really document in great detail, as Gerry is known for, of how we got there. And it's a very valuable part of the book, because it kind of really breaks down in intricate detail, facts and figures. So you read the stories, and then it ends with, okay, if you want more, if you really want to know the intricate details, here it is as part of that. So I just wanted to make sure for those who are considering reading the book, you kind of get this bonus, if you will, from the owner of the company, who is the subject for a lot of the stories. Now, to your question, who benefits from this book? So the dedication is, for those who are entrepreneurs, leaders, innovators, who are seeking affirmation that there are no shortcuts to the path to find success in business. I'm paraphrasing, but that's really what motivated me to write that dedication for the book. And I truly mean that. It takes a lot of time to get to that kind of success, and it's grinding, and it's resilience, it's having grit, right? It takes those stories, and again, they are documented throughout the book to back that all up. And it's interesting because, as I've gotten back into business, I'm finding that that's all true. Like, it's all those things. Like, even though I'm I'm a teeny microcosm compared to something like Price Industries, but the principles translate into someone like me who's, starting and building a business again as well too, that when I'm grinding it, it's like, okay, this is necessary. It is necessary and has proven to be very valuable now as I'm going into 2 years back into the business, that some of these principles that I was just applying to my business have bared fruit in a way. And, Gerry talks about building foundation and legacy. You're investing, you're not making money, you're putting a lot in, so you're going to grow down the road.
Mm-hmm.
And you will read in some very incredible case studies in which exactly that happened. Again, I won't get too much into detail, but there's times where heavily in debt and, in recession, and, invest millions more into another part of the business at the time that put the company further in debt. But fast forward, has made the company very profitable. So to see that and to read what Gerry was trying to process, what his team was trying to process to make that investment at that time, to what has turned out to be just a runaway hit, decades later. That's not easy, I think, for just the average business person to understand and grasp. So to read it at that level, you can glean from that and go, okay, I can see how, if I apply that in my business, I can assess that given some level of time, maybe I will have that level of return relation to where I am in business.
And when you think about this book, yes, Price is $1 billion organization, but all of the tenets in here apply. We're a small group with Wood Dragon Books. We're about a dozen people who are involved in the organization. And every one of those tenets, when I was working on this, I could see, yeah, that actually applies to me. We're a totally different industry. We're much smaller. We're not producing the same type of product. And it's just like, oh yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. That makes sense. And that's why I think that this book really does goes beyond the industry, the HVAC industry. It goes beyond the Winnipeg, the Manitoba marketing, it goes beyond the Canadian market. And of course, Price is global, but in the sense that really good business practice is really good business practice. And I think this book has some fantastic illustrations of that. And that's part of the reason why we're so excited at Wood Dragon Books to bring this book to the marketplace. Now, before we go, I just want you to briefly talk about the pie and the tagline, like an ant on a blueberry pie.
Yeah. Okay. Well, and I think you make a really good point with that last question, Jeannie. And I think it's important to know, you and I are on the prairies, and we have this sense of prairie pride where we feel we need to punch above our weight. And that's really why I took the book on, is that, I'm proud to be from Winnipeg. I'm a proud Manitoban. And my hope is that this book shines the light on this company as an example, can grow from a place in Winnipeg. And even here in the city, sometimes people kind of go, who's Price? What's Price Industries? And then they read about it, they have no idea. And they have such a huge footprint around North America, and now growing around the world. And so my hope is that from a business point of view, that it shines a spotlight on our city and our province, that a company like this can grow substantially, anchored from Winnipeg. And so again, that's something I'm really hoping for. Now, as for the cover, like an ant on a blueberry pie. So anyone who knows Gerry, those who know Gerry knows he's full of very folksy phrases. That are actually coined Gerryisms, and they're throughout the book as well too. And he talks about that. You know, he talks about, I want to build a company. I'm like an ant on a blueberry pie. I just want one blueberry that I can extract and then have my slice of the blueberry pie. So, you know, it's kind of like that slice of the blueberry pie represents their space in the HVAC industry, which is air distribution. And in a lot of categories within that air distribution category, they're number one right across the board. And that was Gerry's goal. And again, he saw himself just like that, you know, that ant, ants are these small, well, remarkable creatures that have such incredible strength. And that's what Gerry saw. Like he said, just, I'm an ant on a blueberry pie. That's all I want. Just give me my one blueberry so I can take a slice. I can extract a slice. And that's what he's done.
Well, and I think that's a perfect place to end our interview on. I think it's an amazing book. I think it's an amazing business story of an amazing businessman. And I think you did an exceptional job, Rob, of pulling the best of their legacy in one place so that it can be shared, not only, like you say, within the organization and within their vendors and partners that they work with globally, but just people who really want to read an interesting business story, especially from a Canadian and a Western Canadian at that. So thank you for all the effort you put into this book. And I hope it does amazing things for a lot of business owners out there. So again, for everyone who's listening, I'm Jeanne Martinson, and I'm the publisher of Wood Dragon Books. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Jeanne.